exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Que l'on ouvre les portes. Statements by members. Déclaration de député. L'honorable député de Saint...
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent.
Over 30 years, Canada's Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne paid an official visit to Greece to discuss the conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean with Prime Minister Mitsotakis and his Greek counterpart. And speaking of Greece, today, October 28, Greeks around the world are celebrating HoC Day. Perhaps not altogether like other years, but virtually and in spirit, to commemorate 80 years since Prime Minister Ioannis Metaxas' response to Benito Mussolini's ultimatum to allow the Axis forces to enter Greece or to go to war. Metaxas bravely responded, "Alors c'est la guerre." The Greeks held the Germans back for 6 weeks and played a pivotal role in the outcome of World War II. Referring to their role in this war, Winston Churchill said, "Hence, we shall not say that Greeks fight like heroes, but that heroes fight like Greeks." Zito η Ελλάδα, zito Kanatas, zito η 28 Οκτωβρίου.
The Honourable Member for Essex.
Mr. Speaker, early in 2020, the town of Kingsville lost a leader after a long and courageous battle with cancer. Robert Peterson, Bob to all those who knew and loved him, was a devoted husband to his beautiful wife Audrey and beloved by his many children and grandchildren. Bob served as Reeve, Deputy Reeve, and Council for many years. My friend, duck hunting buddy, and political mentor is sorely missed. Mr. Speaker, my riding of Essex has 5 fantastic municipalities: Lakeshore, LaSalle, Amherstburg, Essex, and Kingsville, where Bob served. My staff and I have received thousands of cries for help. Our municipal politicians and their staff have no doubt done the same. Frontline workers wear many uniforms, Mr. Speaker, and yes, sometimes suits. Mr. Speaker, I ask this House to join me in extending a heartfelt thanks to my local mayors, Santos, Snively, Aldo, Bain, and Bondi, their respective councils, as well as municipal representatives in ridings across Canada for their determination, resilience, and hard work through it all. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Surrey Newton. The Honourable Member, I believe you might be on mute.
Sorry. Mr. Speaker, on October 29th, Muslims across Canada will celebrate Milad un-Nabi, commemorating the birth, life, and message of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, where even remotely in the times of a global pandemic, happiness, harmony, and love will be exchanged with family, friends, and neighbors. More than ever, the divine blessings of Allah will fill homes with hope, joy, and optimism in the challenging times. So all those are celebrating in Newton, in Surrey, and all across Canada, those are observing Eid Milad un-Nabi. Peace be with you. Allah Hafiz.
The Honourable
Member for Beauport-Limoilou. Mr. Speaker, today I'd like to pay tribute to the strength, resilience, and high sense of mutual support that characterize the people of Beauport-Limoilou. When it's time to donate clothes to organizations or food to the free self-serve fridges like the one placed near the Patro Rocamadour, or to volunteer for places like OCPAC, Autonomie Limoilou, la Cuisine Collective de Beauport, Entraide Agapé, la Bouchée Généreuse, le Cab 23, or le Pivot, everyone pitches in to alleviate the hardships faced by others. To those organizations, I would add those who provide mental health support, such as la Fondation Cerveau, la Boussole, and le Cercle Polaire, to name a few, since Beauport-Limoilou has more than 100 of them. These individuals and organizations show that Beauport-Limoilou has generous people living there, always ready to work together to help each other out, whatever life throws in our path. Together we are stronger. The Honourable Member for Brossard-Saint-Lambert. Mr. Speaker, we're approaching the end of Women's History Month in Canada, and I'd like to take this opportunity to highlight, with great emotion, some of the women who've marked the history of Brossard-Saint-Lambert.
Honor warrant our gratitude and admiration because through hard work, conviction, and sheer stubbornness, they moved mountains of resistance to change. In 1965, Olga Melikoff, Muriel Parks, and Valerie Neal were the activist mothers who moved to create bilingual education in a St. Lambert elementary school. Thus was born French immersion in Canada. In
1983, Josette Lemieux-Lepage became Brossard's first woman mayor. She had heart and wit and was the driving force behind the creation of the local library in 1976. She was also behind the 1989 Brossard Declaration, making Brossard the first municipality in Canada to declare itself multicultural. Unfortunately, I don't have time to talk about all the women who've made Brossard-Saint-Lambert such an extraordinary riding. But know this, my dear women, you have my deep gratitude. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to highlight the work today of Nicole Jacques, the CEO of Moisson Beauce. This regional food bank, purveyors of happiness for over 25 years, has served some 12 million kilos of goods for a value of $63 million to some 60 organizations in the area. Ms. Jacques is a fighter, and she's been dedicated with heart for 12 years to this organization. She's kept her calm and met the challenge of feeding those affected by historic flooding in 2019, as well as the pandemic. She also made sure that this organization grew like a beautiful flower. The food bank now receives more than 3 times more customers than when it opened. Thank you, Ms. Jacques, for all the work you've done to help the people of Beauce when they were in need. Thank you for bringing around you all these high-quality partners and such a dedicated team. I wish you all the best for the future. Happy retirement, Nicole.
For Niagara Centre.
Mr. Speaker, October marks 65 years since Canada and the United States exchanged formal instruments of ratification for the Convention on the Great Lakes Fishery, creating the Great Lakes Fishery Commission. This treaty solidified a binational partnership that focused on perpetuating Great Lakes science, cross-border relationships, and the control of the invasive sea lamprey parasite basin-wide. And this partnership has yielded, Mr. Speaker, numerous benefits worth billions of dollars and thousands of jobs annually. In fact, ending divided governance by ensuring that federal, state, and provincial agencies and fishery management professionals work towards a collective benefit is one of the treaty's greatest achievements. Turning back a trend established prior to the treaty where an everyone for themselves mentality assured an ecological race to the bottom. Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the GLFC on 65 years of success. I look forward to working together to further strengthen the Canada-U.S. partnership in the years ahead. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Etobicoke Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I'm sure everybody is aware, today is National Chocolate Day. But everybody is aware that Saturday is Halloween, and normally families would be getting all ready for the excitement that Halloween brings. When our kids are older, they won't remember every Halloween, but they will remember this one, Mr. Speaker. So let's focus on not what we can't do, but let's focus on what we can do. Let's make this a Halloween that every kid wants to remember for the rest of their life. Use your ghoulish imagination, be creative, but stay home, stay safe, watch a horror movie, and have fun. Now, I want to give a special shout out to my 2 nieces who are currently in Thunder Bay, Kira and Tegan, and my niece in Vancouver, Caitlin, and a special shout out to my nephew, Brogan, who is turning 13 today. Mr. Speaker, that in itself is very scary, let me tell you. So enjoy Halloween, everybody. Be creative, and Brogan, happy birthday, buddy.
The Honourable Member for Northumberland, Peterborough South.
close friend of mine lost a family member, I experienced the stinging pain of suicide. Unfortunately, suicide is the second leading cause of death among youth and young adults. 60% of suicidal youth reported wanting to speak to someone but not knowing where to turn. This issue has been exacerbated and worsened by the COVID pandemic. In these times of heightened fear, stress, and loneliness, I would like to encourage everyone in this house and outside to take a moment and reach out to your loved ones. Check in on them. Let them know they are not alone. Remind them that you love them. And please, please go home tonight and give your children a hug.
The Honourable Member for Avalon.
Mr. Speaker, this week I had the pleasure of visiting Smalling Land Farm located on the southern shore here in Avalon. This facility is the brainchild of Larry Podester and his family and will be the first large-scale organic farm in the province. 4 years ago, Larry lost his son to suicide, and since then has been working to provide mental health resources and to eliminate stigma. They started the Jacob Podester Memorial Foundation and continue to honour his memory through Smalling Land Farm. This facility is truly impressive. It will be home to organic duck egg production, year-round organic greenhouses, millions of organic bees, and so much more. It will be home to a certified horse therapy program for at-risk youth. The Podester family haven't given up on the people of this province. They haven't given up on our economy and are committed to giving others a leg up. I would like to congratulate Smalling Land Farm on pushing forward a vision of food sustainability, healthy living, and mental health awareness. I wish Larry and his family success now and well into the future.
Honourable Member for Cypress Hills Grasslands.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to take this opportunity to wish my daughter Kenzie a happy 6th birthday. I'm sad to be away from home today, but as we celebrated her birthday this past weekend, I was able to assure her that I was needed in Ottawa to fight for a better Canada, one where she can grow up in a free and prosperous society. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, I have concern for her and her sister's future, as our home province of Saskatchewan currently has the highest number of cases of domestic violence among all the provinces. And while Saskatchewan has recently passed a law that would allow police to disclose information that would help protect potential victims of interpersonal violence, unfortunately, the RCMP are not able to comply with Clare's law, as they are bound by a federal privacy law. As such, I'm asking the Ministers of Justice and Public Safety to amend the Privacy Act and enable the RCMP in Saskatchewan to comply with Clare's law, and ultimately protect our loved ones from potential abuse at the hand of their partners.
The Honourable Member for Selkirk Interlake Eastman.
Mr. Speaker, 2020 marks 100 years since the end of Canada's first national internment operations during the First World War. Canada labelled naturalized Canadians from Ukraine and other regions in Europe as enemy aliens. The government confiscated their land, property, and cash assets and imprisoned 8,600 people in internment camps for years and used them as forced labourers. My grandparents, my Bubba and Guido, were shamefully considered enemy aliens. Yet at the same time, my Bubba's brother was proudly fighting for Canada in the 44th Battalion. Although they are allowed to work their farm, being enemy aliens meant a weekly 20-mile horse ride to report into the closest RCMP station during the Great War and for another 2 years after the signing of the armistice. The internment of Ukrainians and other Eastern Europeans in Canada was a grave injustice. It's important to educate all Canadians on the entirety of Canada's history, including our darkest moments. Today, on National Internment Education Day, we remember the innocent lives lost and all those who were impacted. Vichnaya Paymet for all who perished.
The Honourable Member for London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent Kathleen Top was about halfway through her maternity leave when COVID-19 hit. When she returned to work as a server in August, her hours were cut. She cannot place her daughter into childcare and is denied financial assistance because Kathleen didn't have a spot before the pandemic. Another constituent, Carrie Cooper, reached out to me about her friend, a recent master's graduate and new mother. She is raising 4 children and is an advocate for student mothers at King's University. But Carrie's friend, like Kathleen, is ineligible for all supports. The CERB, the CESB, the recovery benefit, and EI. These women are unable to begin or return to careers because they can't afford full-time childcare, and like so many parents, they don't know where to turn. Women are used to fighting for their rights, for fairness, for equality, and for support because of their gender. They've been left out because of specific decisions of this government. When will governments understand that real progress requires programs like universal affordable childcare that is accessible for everyone?
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. An organization in Montreal is celebrating its 25th anniversary today, and I would invite people to visit their Facebook page. It's a special occasion for me, Mr. Speaker, because I spent 6 years working there. If there are so many young people here in the House, I think it's largely thanks to organizations like the one I'm talking about. And a lot of work was done to encourage people to stay in school and to enter into leadership positions like boards of directors. It's important for young people everywhere to get interested in politics and public life, and that's why I'm here today. I'm sure they influenced a lot of people, and so I'd like to say thank you, and I'd like to tell young people listening, get involved. Your spot is waiting for you. Thank you.
My riding of Portage-Lisgar is a shining example of how Canadians have stepped up and helped each other during the pandemic. An example like Winkler Business, Ironman Industries, who adjusted their business to build mobile hand-washing stations. Or Tyler Moran, also of Winkler, who manufactured face mask extenders for frontline workers. Or RV part manufacturer Icon Technology, who switched their production to face shields. Then, Mr. Speaker, there are Altona residents Melanie Schrader and Brenda Driedger. They made and donated hundreds of masks to truck drivers and healthcare workers. And in Portage-La Prairie, with the help of many volunteers, the Portage Community Revitalization Corporation, the Family Resource Center, and the Portage MCC opened up a soup kitchen to help those in need during the pandemic. The strength of a community is boosted when people come together to help each other, and Portage-Lisgar has always been a strong and giving region. Thank you so much, Portage-Lisgar. You are true community heroes.
The Honourable Member for Pierrefonds-Dollard.
The country just marked Small Business Week, and I'd like to recognize the resilience of small and medium-sized businesses in Pierrefonds-Dollard. There's no question small businesses have been hard hit by the pandemic. Our government has stepped up, though, to provide supports by covering the wages of workers, by providing emergency loans, by subsidizing rents. At the local level, to ensure businesses knew about these programs, my team and I developed a small business outreach program. With the help of the West Island Chamber of Commerce, we identified over 1,800 businesses in the riding. We sent dedicated mailers to each of these businesses to explain these programs. My staff, along with dedicated volunteers like Alicia and Zakia, also called over 750 small businesses. In each conversation, we sought to help entrepreneurs and employees navigate federal programs. Our message to small businesses is that we're here for you. We're here to help you stay resilient in these challenging times.
Oral questions. Question orale. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Procurement Minister told this House that the government did not have a deal for ventilators with their Liberal friend Frank Baylis, but she forgot to add that Baylis is a partner in the deal. Baylis makes the ventilators. In fact, the ventilators are called the Baylis ventilator, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister ask his former MP, Frank Baylis, to change the name of the Baylis ventilator so that his minister did not mislead this House?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from day one, we engaged Canadians across the country to step up in their businesses, to contribute to the efforts we all knew we needed to do to deliver, including many former politicians and known partisan supporters stepped up across the country, like all Canadians. one well-known conservative businessman named Rick Jameson stepped up because he was a successful auto parts manufacturer and wanted to contribute to the efforts we made to deliver ventilators. He reached out, contracted to Baylis Medical because they could deliver the parts that would help him deliver ventilators. Our agreement with the government, as a government, is with FTI, Rick Jameson's company.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It seems it is who you know in the PMO, Mr. Speaker. Nous savons que l'entreprise Baylis...
We know that the Baylis company copied the ventilator model from an Irish company. And yet Baylis charged more than $100 million more than his competitor. It costs less, yet he charges more. What a remarkable deal for the Liberal family. Why is there a different set of rules for friends of the Liberals than for all other Canadians? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I think the Leader of the Opposition finds himself in a difficult position because nobody in this House would accuse Rick Peterson, a well-known conservative, Rick Jameson, rather. I'm sorry, I'm not that familiar with him because he's a conservative businessman. It is my friends across the aisle who should know him. But he's the one who signed a contract with the Government of Canada to deliver ventilators. And he worked with a Liberal who has a company that's working really well. But really, the question is for Mr. Jameson as to why he chose Baylis to work with, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, we learned that the Liberal government is influencing the judicial nominations process, one that should be free from bias. In fact, he even uses the list of Liberal donors to decide who will become a judge. Once again, Mr. Speaker, why is there one process for Liberal lawyers and a completely different process for everyone else? The Honourable Prime Minister. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, we created a merit-based process for all Canadians, regardless of their political affiliation. Judges are chosen by an independent committee based on merit. Of course, we always look at the choices after, but the judges are chosen based on merit, and they are also chosen based on diversity, including political diversity. But ultimately, the most important thing is that they offer legal advice that reflects the reality of Canada.
The Minister is telling Canadians to trust him. There's no influence. The stories in the paper are false, that he would never interfere in the independence of the justice system. Sound familiar, Mr. Speaker? Canadians have seen this movie before. It's called PMO Ethics Violation 2, Revenge of SNC Lavalin. With this Prime Minister, the scandal sequels are as spine-tingling as the original. So again, Mr. Speaker, why are there one set of rules for Liberal lawyers and one set of rules for everyone else?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. We brought in a merit-based appointment system after having had a government under the Conservatives that had highly torqued all of its judicial nomination processes. We brought in a merit-based process that is better set to reflect the full diversity of this country. Independent judicial advisory committees across the country make recommendations to the judiciary. We will always look to appoint the very best people to the judiciary. That's what Canadians expect, while they also expect that they be the reflection of the diversity of this country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when the COVID crisis hit, this government was late with closing the border. They've been late with rapid tests, and now it seems the government will be late with the delivery of vaccines to Canadians. Will the Prime Minister tell this House why he signed a contract that guarantees that Canada will be at the back of the line when it comes to the vaccine rollout?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Again, Mr. Speaker, that's simply not true. From the very beginning, we acted quickly on countering this pandemic as best as we possibly could. From early January, the Public Health Advisory Board was in place talking about the rumours and the concerns around a virus coming out of China. We then had emergency meetings. We then were able to deliver direct help to Canadians within mere weeks after the shutdown. Something that the Conservatives have pointed out was far too quick. Our priorities should have been elsewhere, maybe with big businesses rather than helping families. And on the vaccines, we have continued to move forward to make sure that Canadians have access to vaccines.
L'honorable député de Bel.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. During the crisis with Indigenous peoples, the Prime Minister clearly stated that one does not send in the army against one's own population. And yet, during the October crisis, that was exactly what happened. There were nearly 500 unwarranted arrests, people who were held, cut off from their families, who never received compensation. Does the principle that the current Prime Minister has expressed, should that have been applied by Prime Minister Trudeau in Quebec in 1980? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. During the October crisis, the Quebec minister was playing ball in Saint-Lambert with his nephew innocently one evening, and he was kidnapped and assassinated by a terrorist cell. Mr. Speaker, those are the events from the October crisis that we should remember. Of course, there will always be political debates about what happened. But let us remember that a Quebec politician was kidnapped and assassinated under horrendous circumstances, and we must remember him, his service, and his family. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I asked a question on one topic, and he answers about a different topic, just as I expected. There were raids sponsored by Ottawa that recall the raids that occurred in the communist era Soviet Union. There were tens and thousands of questionings, arbitrary arrests. Does this Prime Minister deny that the RCMP had expressly recommended to the government that it should not proceed, that it wasn't justified? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in October 1970, the Premier of Quebec, as well as the Leader of the Opposition, René Lévesque, agreed that it was a good idea to send in the troops to protect Quebec. In fact, the Mayor of Montreal asked the federal government to send in federal troops under Quebec stewardship to ensure the safety of the province during a democratic crisis, a crisis for the Quebec nation, and that is what the federal government did. It always wished to be there to help the provinces, as it will always wish to do. The Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Thank you. Stephen Harper cut funding for healthcare, and this Prime Minister has continued down that same path. As a result, long-term care centres don't have the resources they need. They did not have those resources during the first wave of COVID-19. Lives were lost. Will this Prime Minister commit today to ensure the appropriate funding to take care of our seniors? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in this pandemic, tragically, the most vulnerable members of our society, seniors, were adversely affected by this crisis. We must all work together. All stripes of government and all levels of government must work together to keep our seniors healthy and safe. That is why we worked closely with the Quebec government to ensure that they have appropriate PPE. We even sent in the Army and subsequently the Red Cross to help. We will do so with all provinces working together to protect seniors.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, now over 10,000 Canadians have lost their life to COVID-19. One of those people is Denis Mathieu. His family sold their home so they could afford to put him in a long-term care home. He ended up losing his life on October 16th. The long-term care home was owned by the federal government and is for profit. Now, my question is very simple. This is not about jurisdiction, this is about responsibility. Will the Prime Minister commit to protecting people in homes owned by his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, every Canadian deserves to be able to age in dignity, in safety, and in good health. That is something that we all, regardless of our political affiliations, regardless of the order of governments in which we serve, can agree on. That's why through this pandemic, as we've seen the terrible tragedies families and individuals have faced, have been doing as much as we can to be there. And we will continue to. We will continue to work with the provinces. We will continue to ensure that equipment is sent and that support is given. We will ensure that best practices are shared. We will protect our seniors.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Le Canada a le taux de chômage le plus élevé.
Canada has the highest unemployment rate in the G7, higher than the US, the UK, Japan, Germany, France, or Italy. One of the reasons that we have the highest unemployment rate is that there is a war on jobs by this government. According to a Department of Finance report, a Canadian may lose up to 80% of each additional dollar earned by working, which penalizes workers for working. When will this government stop its war on jobs? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, from the beginning of this pandemic, we have been there for workers and Canadians. During the first wave, people needed to stay home, and we delivered with the Canada Emergency Response Benefit to enable people to stay home in order to protect people's neighbours and first-line health workers. We also helped small and large businesses with the wage subsidy. We helped these businesses get through the crisis. And we're going to keep assisting Canadians and small businesses that need help. The Honourable Member for Carleton.
7 nations also have COVID, yet we have higher unemployment here than in the United States, the UK, France, Italy, Japan, and Germany. One of the reasons we're now learning is because of a newly obtained report from Finance Canada showing the high levels of marginal effective tax rates. That is the amount that a person loses on each extra dollar they earn. For example, someone earning just $30,000 can lose 60 cents on the dollar that they earn. A single mother earning $55,000 can lose 80 cents on the dollar that they earn. This is a war on work. We need to get Canadians back into jobs and reward them for their contributions. Will the Prime Minister end the war on work?
Honourable Prime Minister.
I don't blame any Canadians watching for being slightly puzzled trying to figure out what it is the member from Carleton is trying to say. It's actually easier if you look into a context where he said, first of all, that he didn't believe in big government programs, even in a time of pandemic. And secondly, their issue of disincentives to work, which is why they were so concerned about the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB that helped over 8 million Canadians. They kept saying, oh no, man, it's going to be hard to hire people for our factories. No, the issue is that we need to continue to support people and know that Canadians would much prefer to have a job, but they need to be supported.
The Honourable Member for Carleton.
Well, not only do we support this, sir, we said that people should be allowed to earn more than the $1,000 cutoff that Prime Minister imposed. He said that if you earn $1 more than $1,000, he would kick you from the CERB to the curb. We said there should be rewards for work, but now we learn that his war on work predated the pandemic. In 2019, according to his own finance department, single mothers earning just $55,000 could lose as much as 80 cents on each additional dollar they earn. Will he once and for all end his war on work?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
So I think we can all agree that this government has done the right things, as he just said, in being there to support Canadians through this pandemic. But arguments he's making about pre-pandemic are also completely out to lunch because, first of all, we are the government that saw 1 million new jobs created over the course of our first mandate, while at the same time seeing hundreds of thousands of kids and families lifted out of poverty. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we delivered a Canada Child benefit that helped single moms, that's helped families across the country, initiatives, unfortunately, that the Conservatives voted against.
The honourable member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, big grocery corporations have decided that they need to make more money off the backs of Canadians in the middle of a pandemic. Walmart started it this summer when it announced that it would be charging their suppliers increased fees to pay for store upgrades. That means more expensive food, and it also puts Canadian jobs at risk. On Cancino, on Huawei, on Bayless, the Prime Minister took the side of the connected. Will the Prime Minister at least side with Canadians as Walmart rises the price of their food?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, ensuring good food on Canadians' tables at affordable prices is something that has been a priority for this government from the very beginning, which is why we moved forward on creating a surplus food program, why we moved forward on working with food banks across this country, but mostly why we made sure to support frontline workers and support our farmers and our agricultural producers to continue to deliver quality food on people's tables. We will continue to be there to support Canadians as long as it takes, whatever it takes, through this pandemic.
Honourable member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister needs to understand that the last thing that Canadians need during these trying times is an unfair hit on their grocery bills. Walmart isn't alone. Sobeys, Metro, and others have jumped on this bandwagon. Clearly, we have a competition problem for Canadians. Major grocery stores are lining up to make things more expensive, while other parts of Canada are reporting record problems with food insecurity. So, will the Prime Minister stand up to the big grocery giants and make sure that our Canadian competition laws are being followed?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we have done from the beginning of this pandemic is stand up for Canadians. We've been there to support families. We've been there to support our agricultural producers and our farmers. We've been there to ensure that northern families get help in terms of the high costs of food. We've been there to support food banks that unfortunately across the country are seeing more and more people need to step up during this time of pandemic. We will continue to be there to support Canadians. We will continue to be there to have Canadians' backs every step of the way. That's a commitment we've made to Canadians, and we will be there for as long as it takes, whatever it takes.
The honourable member for Lambton, Kent, Middlesex.
Friends in the big grocery business, but Mr. Speaker, the mandatory isolation program is about to expire on October 31st, which is this Saturday, while the isolation protocols are still in place for workers, seasonal workers. Canadian farmers are already stretched to the max with COVID-19 mitigation, with market losses, loss of sales, and with agri-stability not working the way it should. Canada's food security requires decisive action. Will the Prime Minister at least commit to the bare minimum to extend the mandatory isolation support program now?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be there for our farmers and our producers. We will continue to support the frontline workers who are putting food on our tables. We are continuing to support all Canadians while we make it through this incredibly difficult time. Canadians need to know that their institutions are there to serve them, and we will continue to. I can highlight we've made many investments to support directly our farmers and agricultural producers, and we will continue to be there for those communities.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly.
The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, René Lévesque was not the leader of the opposition. He never approved the War Measures Act. He, in fact, said that it was a military occupation of Quebec. Premier Bourassa, Prime Minister Trudeau, and the Mayor of Montreal created out of whole cloth the idea of an insurrection. Led by Claude Ryan, Guy Rocher, and René Lévesque, among others, supposedly, as well as union leaders. Does this Prime Minister believe that an insurrection was discovered in 1970 in Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as I said, there are many political debates that will continue. I've already given my perspective on the October crisis. Here, on this side of the House, we will continue to work to support Quebecers now and in the future and deliver for them. We were there with CERB for several months. We will continue to be there with EI, with help to small businesses, with help for seniors and families. We know that this is a difficult period, and this federal government will be there for Quebecers. The honourable member. Other groups get apologies. Quebecers never. The federal government condoned all sorts of violence in Quebec. And in fact, without the Bloc Québécois, this government would not have recognized the Armenian genocide or the attack in France last week. Threatening to shoot people's loved ones before their very eyes, threatening them with weapons in the middle of the night, that's extremely violent. Wouldn't that justify an apology from the Canadian apology machine? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, all Canadians and all parties condemn the violence we saw in France recently. We are there to support the French who have suffered a heinous terrorist attack, the murder of Samuel Paty, and we will stand together on that point. I recognize the Bloc Québécois for having brought forward a motion, but any of our parties would have done so. We will continue to stand together against violence and extremism in the world.
Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Speaker, for months the Prime Minister has been promising a new tone on China, but nothing has actually changed. For almost 2 years, Canadians Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor have been in prison in China. In that time, the government has given almost $350,000 to the Canada-China Business Council, the same group that protested even raising the issue of the Michaels at their recent dinner. Speaker, why does this government's new tone sound like the same old song and dance?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we've been clear from the very beginning about our principles, about our commitment to the rule of law, and our deep concern for our detained citizens. We have worked over the past many months to try and bring them home, and we will continue to work extremely hard, not just on our own, but with allies around the world who've consistently spoken up against China's arbitrary detention of citizens and its coercive diplomacy. We will continue to be loud and clear on the principles of defending human rights and the rule of law. We will continue to work with countries around the world, even as we highlight the excesses and the wrongs on human rights.
The honourable member for Leeds, Grenville, Thousand Islands and Rideau Lakes.
Well, Speaker, you'd think with the ties that this Prime Minister has to the CCP that he'd be able to get more action, but that dinner was also paid for with a grant from Canadian taxpayers thanks to the Heritage Minister and Destinations Canada. We don't know yet how much Canadians paid so that the Canadian business elite could applaud communist China and wag their finger at their own government, but we know $1 is too much. Can the Prime Minister tell this House how much Canadians paid for the latest love-in with Canada's corporate China lobby?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, even as we have consistently stood up strongly in defence of the two Michaels, in defence of the Uyghurs, and in concern for Canadian citizens and indeed all citizens in Hong Kong, we have continued to look at China as a market for our grain farmers, for our seafood producers, for so many Canadians who recognize that the second largest economy in the world represents opportunities for Canadian families and businesses. And walking that careful line of being unequivocal on the defense of human rights and recognizing economic ties with the second largest economy in the world is what we've been doing.
L'honorable député de Charlebourg.
The honourable member for Charlebourg, Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, the first contract signed for a COVID-19 vaccine was signed with the Chinese pharmaceutical giant. But the communist regime in China refused to export the vaccine. Currently, it is not clear how much this government paid to the company. Can the Prime Minister tell us how much was paid? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Our approach on vaccines, like our approach for PPE, is to ensure that we have enough and that we explore a range of options for Canadians. We have signed 7 deals for vaccines throughout the world that we hope to be able to deliver to Canadians, because no one knows what vaccine is going to be ready first and which one will work the best. That's why we've signed several deals. We're working with COVAX internationally to ensure that there are other sources of vaccines in Canada. We are doing everything we can to ensure that Canadians stay safe. It is Conservatives who don't want to do what needs to be done to protect Canadians. The Honourable Member, Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we want to fix the situation. But this government has focused on China since the beginning, and ultimately we were tricked by the Chinese Communist regime. The Prime Minister has spoken about the other deals, but those were signed 3 months too late. We're going to get vaccines 3 months later than other countries because of this. Instead of insulting us, because we're being insulted by our colleagues across the aisle from the very beginning, instead, can the Prime Minister confirm whether we'll be getting the vaccines 3 months later than other countries? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, as a government, we negotiated with vaccine producers throughout the world. They are not currently producing these vaccines. They are doing research to see if they can find a vaccine. We don't know which company will come up with a vaccine first, or which will have the most effective vaccine. So we have indeed negotiated with many different companies, because we know that Canadians want us to get vaccines soon, on time to help them, and that is exactly what we negotiated.
London Fanshawe.
Mr. Speaker, when the folks of Garderie Tunney's daycare contacted their Liberal local MP for Ottawa Centre to ask for help to keep their doors open, she suggested that they should apply for a rental subsidy. The landlord for this daycare centre is the federal government. They almost doubled the rent to $14,000 per month. Families are losing their daycare service in the middle of a pandemic. How can the Prime Minister justify to parents the loss of their daycare services over his increase in rent? And when will he make sure Garderie Tunney's daycare stays open so parents have a safe place for their kids?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the need for childcare is exactly why we move forward in the throne speech and are working forward to ensure we're delivering childcare with the provinces right across the country. We understand it's not just a social necessity, but an economic necessity as well. In regards to Garderie Tunney's daycare, which is a well-loved daycare in Ottawa, during the pandemic, PSPC has ensured that rent relief is available to all tenants under the Canada Emergency Rent Assistance Program. More recently, we've informed the daycare that November rent will be deferred, and we'll continue to work with them on a path forward.
Honourable Member for New Westminster, Burnaby.
Well, at the Global Forum just a few minutes ago, the Finance Minister said there is no free lunch during the pandemic. I disagree. Banks have made over $15 billion in profits so far. Billionaires have amassed more than $37 billion in wealth. And web giants like Amazon have made obscene profits and pay little tax. It really sucks, Mr. Speaker, that hardworking people who are struggling are going to be forced to pay for the economic recovery. So will the Prime Minister commit today to imposing a wealth tax on the ultra-rich to pay for the recovery? And will he force the web giants to pay their fair share?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we committed in the throne speech that we would be moving forward and making the web giants pay their fair share. That's something that all Canadians can understand, and we're happy to move forward with that. On the issue of raising taxes on the wealthiest 1%, Mr. Speaker, that's actually the very first thing we did when we came into office in 2015. We created a new higher tax bracket and forced the wealthiest 1% to pay more. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the NDP voted against it. Mr. Speaker, we will always look to ensure that we're supporting the middle class and people working hard to join it through this pandemic and beyond.
The Honourable Member for Humber River, Black Creek.
Mr. Speaker, in the most recent speech from the throne, the government committed to acting on critical issues important to seniors. This included increases to the OAS and the CPP, which will positively impact seniors in my riding and, of course, across Canada. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his leadership, especially his commitment to work with the provinces to establish national guidelines for long-term homes. Can the Prime Minister elaborate today on just how we will continue supporting our seniors?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Humber River Black Creek for her question and especially for her tireless work for her community. In addition to the speech from the throne commitments the member mentioned, we're building at least 7,000 new affordable housing units for seniors under the National Housing Strategy. To create opportunities for seniors to be more connected, supported, and active members of their community, we invested an additional $100 million over 5 years in the New Horizons for Seniors program, which helped community groups provide local programs to support. We will continue to work hard every day to provide more support for our seniors.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Come By Chance refinery shut down, Suncor layoffs, White Rose oil field in jeopardy, HoC layoffs and now being sold. This government has left energy workers out in the cold. News broke yesterday that the Steelworkers Union is putting more energy into finding a buyer for Come By Chance than the Natural Resources Minister is. Mr. Speaker, why is this Prime Minister's biggest energy accomplishment in 5 years unemployment lines instead of pipelines?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Since day one, we've taken action to support our oil and gas sector. During the pandemic, we invested $1.7 billion to remediate inactive and abandoned wells, which will protect and create thousands of jobs. We continue to support the sector with the wage subsidy. Almost 1 in every 3 workers in mining and oil and gas stayed in their jobs thanks to the subsidy. And the speech from the throne announced it will continue until next summer. We're getting our resources to new markets and using revenue to fund clean energy and climate solutions. And the workers will continue to be at the heart of everything we do.
Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, another Alberta company, a frac sands company, was forced to lay off nearly its entire staff. The government is approving $20 million in loans to a competing company that mines exclusively in the U.S., a loan with interest that can be paid back in kind. When the government interferes like this, you are directly picking winners and losers, forcing yet another mass layoff in the energy sector. Shameful. Does this Prime Minister realize he is allowing a Canadian company to fail so one with a large interest in the U.S. can succeed?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this pandemic has been difficult on Canadians from coast to coast to coast, but we recognize the extra degree of difficulty that the current oil crisis is having on oil workers in Alberta, in Saskatchewan, and indeed in Newfoundland and Labrador. We have been there for them with wage subsidies, with the CERB and with the EI supports. We will continue to look for ways, like we did with orphan wells, to continue to support those workers who have been working hard to build and contribute to our country's well-being over the past many years. We need them going forward to have strong jobs, strong families, and a strong future, and that's what we're committed to working on with them.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the United Kingdom is our 3rd largest export market. We share common values, but we will not have a free trade agreement with them as of December 31st. Not having one in place will mean higher tariffs. For example, 8% on Canadian lobster, 16% on beef. And as of right now, the amounts are 0 under CETA. Where is the Prime Minister's plan to maintain competitive UK access for our seafood workers and ranchers if a transitional agreement is not in place at the end of the year? We're running out of time.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, from the very beginning, we were committed to improving international trade. That is why, under our watch, Canada has signed and ratified major trade deals that give us access, free trade access to 2/3 of the global economy, and we're the only G7 country with free trade with every other G7 country. Obviously, the UK's decision to withdraw from the European Union has made it more complicated with CETA, but I can continue to assure people that we are working with the United Kingdom to ensure a seamless transition. We've been working on it for many years at their rhythm. We will ensure that we're moving forward the right way.
The Honourable Member for Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has us at the back of the line for PPE, at the back of the line for rapid testing, and at the back of the line for vaccines. Now we're at the risk of being at the back of the line for a new trade deal with our oldest ally. The new Japan-UK trade deal goes farther than the old deal the UK had with the EU. Time is running out again. When is the Prime Minister going to get serious about a trade agreement with the United Kingdom?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the member for her interest and can reassure her that over the past 3 or 4 years, we have been working closely with the UK in order to ensure a seamless transition as they exit from the European Union, as we look to continue the excellent trading relationship that we have with the UK. We understand that there are levels of complexity in Brexit, but that is something that we are working with them on as we ensure continued access to Canadian markets for the UK and to the UK for Canadian markets.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Thank you. This Prime Minister, 50 years after Trudeau Sr., tried to push down a peaceful movement by honourable individuals who became party leaders, a premier, builders of the quiet revolution, inspired by artists. Instead, they were called terrorists. Did the Canadian Army not, in 1970, engage in state terrorism ordered by Pierre Elliott Trudeau, the Right Honourable Prime Minister? As I said, Mr. Speaker, I understand that there is still a political debate on what happened 50 years ago. My concern today and in the coming days is to ensure that in 50 years' time, my children and grandchildren and all the grandchildren in Quebec and across the country will look at how we've managed this crisis in the right way, this health crisis, this economic crisis, and they will know that what we've done now will help us for the 50 coming years. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. You can claim to manage a crisis when you can't recognize the mistakes of the past. Quebecers don't feel good in Canada. They don't see themselves in Canada, and they would see another road for their future. In 1980, in 1995, in 1996 even, Canada responds with fear, campaigns of fear. A last chance for the Prime Minister. History will be watching. Will he apologize to the Quebec people? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I think we have to be clear about one thing. The Bloc Québécois was elected by many Quebecers to represent Quebec. The Liberal Party was also elected by many Quebecers in more ridings than the Bloc to represent Quebecers as well. And I would not want, just because the Bloc doesn't see itself within Canada, that we conclude or that it be concluded easily that Quebecers do not see themselves within Canada. Over the years, many things have been done together. All Canadians, be they from Quebec, BC, or elsewhere in the country, have worked together to create this wonderful country that we're so proud of. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, yesterday in response to a question by my colleague, the minister said that 200,000 rapid tests would be sent to Quebec this week. And we learned today that 30,000 tests will be delivered tomorrow. Tomorrow's 30. It's 30,000, not 200,000. A province needs rapid tests. It's part of the solution and would help take Quebec regions out of the red zone. Can the Prime Minister tell us when Quebec will have these rapid tests? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we are working with companies around the world as well as Canadian companies in order to deliver the equipment that is needed across the country. Health Canada is approving as fast as possible safe tests and equipment to help Canadians, and even before the approval of contracts, we have promised to deliver the tests as quickly as possible. Once the contracts are signed, we will do so for Quebec, for the rest of the country, and as quickly as possible in order to ensure that we can get through this pandemic. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. Mr. Speaker, last week, the Minister had promised 60,000 tests. The province will get only 30,000 this week. Yesterday, the minister told us 200,000 tests. And now I'm a little confused. perhaps she should look at her numbers. Quebec is in the midst of a second wave. Because of a lack of rapid testing, restaurants are closed, gyms are closed. Quebec's economy is doing poorly. I would repeat my question. Can the Prime Minister tell us clearly how many and when will these tests be made available to Quebec? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. I understand, Mr. Speaker, the extent to which we all want this crisis to end. We know that we are working very hard together to deliver the required equipment. I want to tell all my colleagues, and they should know this already, that there is not just one solution to get through this pandemic. Yes, rapid tests will be extremely useful and important, and that is why we are working so hard to ensure that everybody can have access to more rapid tests. We must ensure that everything that we do, be it for tests or contact tracing or individual behavior, everything must go together. The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Lafjord. Mr. Speaker, in Quebec, we are doing about 20,000 tests a day. 60,000 tests would only cover 3 days. The Prime Minister said on May 21st that we would have rapid tests in order to deal with the second wave. But now we are in the second wave with the closure of the border and the signing of contracts on vaccines. This government is acting extremely slowly with the availability of rapid tests. When will Quebec be able to have enough tests to fight the second wave? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I can confirm to the Honourable Member that Quebec will have its 200,000 tests this week. We know that testing is part of the solution, and it is our duty to continue to work at all levels to deliver all of the equipment and ensure the behavior that will help us get us through this wave of COVID.
For Kitchener-Conestoga.
Mr. Speaker, the interim results of the 2019-2020 Community-Based Research Center Sex Now survey shows that 1 in 5 sexual minority men have been subjected to sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression change efforts. It's unacceptable that in 2020, some Canadians are still subjected to hurtful stigmas and stereotypes that translate into harmful practices such as conversion therapy. Our government recently tabled legislation that will protect LGBTQ2 individuals from these dangerous practices. Can the Prime Minister tell this House why standing up for LGBTQ2 Canadians is so important?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Kitchener-Conestoga for his question and for his hard work. Conversion therapy is rooted in the harmful premise that one's sexual orientation or gender identity could and even should be changed. Our legislation will criminalize efforts to force someone to change or hide who they are. While Conservatives couch their support for conversion therapy behind misleading arguments, on this side, we will always stand up for the rights of Canadians. We urge all members of all parties to support this bill during this afternoon's vote.
Well, member for Portage-Lisgar.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government made the decision to shut down Canada's early pandemic warning system. The result of that was when COVID hit, Canada was relying on information from the Chinese government, which meant that there were wrong decisions made and delayed decisions made. Now, the government has said, the Minister of Health said that there would be an internal review done on why the government shut down the early pandemic warning system. Can the Prime Minister tell us who will be conducting that review?
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to correct the record. There was no reduction in funding or staffing levels in this case since 2015. We've continued to ensure that Canada is able to respond to urgencies and emergencies around the world. We will continue to base everything we do on science and evidence. As of January 2nd, Dr. Tam convened a meeting of her counterparts across the country to look into and to raise concerns about the news coming out of Wuhan. We have been on this from the very beginning, and we will continue to be.
Honourable member for Portage-Lisgar.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister didn't hear what his Minister of Health said just on Sunday, that in fact that the pandemic the alert system needed to be in effect, and she said that there was going to be a review of why it was shut down. Mr. Speaker, this is very disturbing because we have a pattern where the health minister is making mistakes, making bad decisions, blaming bureaucrats, and then somehow blaming the opposition for asking questions. So Canadians deserve to know why the early warning system was shut down. If the Prime Minister doesn't know, he can say, I don't know, but he needs to answer that question.
Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we all saw these various reports, and following those reports coming out, we did start an investigation to look into exactly what happened, to establish exactly the pattern of facts. What I can confirm is there was no reduction in funding or employment in these agencies, but we obviously need to understand exactly what happened so we can be better prepared in future pandemics. There are many lessons to learn through this one, and that's what we're focused on.
The Honourable Member for Portage-Lisker.
Okay, now we're getting somewhere. So the Prime Minister has admitted that they are looking into why the early warning system was shut down. So I'll ask again. Canadians really do deserve to know. You know, they've just been told that Christmas could be cancelled. They've been told that they're not going to get rapid testing for a long time. Canadians are being told they're on the back of the line for the vaccine. These are really serious issues, Mr. Speaker. So again, Canadians deserve to know who is doing the review of the decisions that the Prime Minister and his government have made around the early pandemic warning system.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I think it's important that Canadians get accurate information, which is why it's important to highlight first and foremost that we have access to a large suite of vaccine potential candidates, and we will continue to ensure that Canadians get vaccines as they become available. We are not at the back of the line. We are also already deploying rapid testing and have been deploying rapid testing for many months in remote and northern communities where the need was most acute. We will continue to work with provinces. We will continue to work with health experts to ensure that we have all the strategies necessary to keep Canadians safe.
The Honourable Member for Brampton North.
Seniors are living longer than ever before, but they're worried about the rising costs of healthcare and running out of their savings as they get older. In engaging with seniors in my riding of Brampton North, I know how challenging it's been for them to adjust to the rising costs of living. Brampton is home to thousands of seniors that have helped build this great city and our country. Could the Prime Minister outline a few of the many programs and supports we have available for seniors and what more our government has planned for them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the member from Brampton North for her important question and, as always, for her tireless advocacy for her community. We announced additional support of $2.5 billion for a one-time tax-free payment for seniors eligible for OAS and GIS. Together with the extra GST credit, that's over $1,500 in tax-free support for a low-income couple. We remain committed to increasing old age security once a senior turns 75 and boosting the Canada Pension Plan's survivors benefit. We've moved forward on increasing New Horizons, and we will continue to stand ready to take additional actions as needed to support seniors.
The Honourable Member for St. John's East.
Canadians are questioning how Mi'kmaq fishers facing violence, threats, and having their property destroyed are being served by the RCMP. The Minister of Indigenous Services publicly disagreed with the Commissioner's assessment of the police response. Last week, the Assembly of First Nations announced Commissioner Lucky had lost their confidence and called for her resignation. Indigenous people who are affected by systemic racism deserve leaders who can understand the problem. Can the Prime Minister explain why and how he still has confidence in the RCMP Commissioner?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, from the beginning, we have strongly condemned any form of violence, harassment, or intimidation towards the Mi'kmaq. The police are responsible for ensuring protection and preventing the escalation of violence, which is why we approved a request from the province for more police resources. We've acknowledged, as has the Commissioner of the RCMP, that throughout its history, the RCMP has not always treated racialized and Indigenous people fairly. There's no question that systemic racism exists, and working with the Commission, we will bring forward meaningful change to ensure that police treat all people with dignity and respect.
That's all the time we have today for question period. C'est tout le temps que nous avons. Before continuing, honourable members, I have the unfortunate duty to inform you of the passing of the Right Honourable Don Mazinkowski. Following discussions among representatives of all parties in the House, I understand there is an agreement to observe a moment of silence in honour of this great Canadian. I now invite honourable members to rise. I want to thank the honourable members, and je comprends que l'honorable député.
I understand the honourable member for Rosemont-La Petite Patrie has a point of order. Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. After consulting all parties, I think you'll find there's unanimous consent for the passing of this motion. Given the situation in Algeria, millions of people are advocating for their individual freedoms. So the House of Commons condemns the repression in Algeria and the lack of respect for human rights and the freedom of prisoners of conscience and political prisoners. Because it's a hybrid session of the House, for the sake of clarity, I would ask only those opposed to the motion to express their opposition. Accordingly, all those opposed to what the honourable member is proposing would please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Hearing no dissenting voices, I declare the motion carried. It being 3:15, pursuant to order made on Wednesday, September 23rd, 2020, the House will now proceed to the taking of the deferred recorded division on the motion at the second